Alex.
Hi, Heather.
Thanks for joining us. So this is your first time with us at Unison, so welcome to the Unison family.
Thank you very much.
So you were born in Calgary. You are a native Calgarian here. You were raised here. You spent your life here, and much like your counterpart Randy, who we just spoke to, you started your job on the front lines as a frontline firefighter, but you shifted over to training other firefighters.
That's right.
And while you were doing that, you, I guess, added a specific skill set to your repertoire before you started coming over to the community safety team. And that specialty is water safety. So in Alberta, we aren't exactly lake community and we don't have oceans. So what are some of the major areas Alberta firefighters and departments support the community around water safety?
No, for sure. And, thank you for having me here, Heather. And I think often people, when they think water safety, they don't think, kind of, we are originated as a prairie town type of thing. But, the unique placement of Calgary being at the confluence of the Elbow and Bow River, like, has been a gathering place for many generations of people before, since 1884, calling it Calgary. But with that, the fast moving water in the Bow River is actually very, very hazardous. So we do a lot of rescues there. There's a lot of different water features. So it's been very important to have that water rescue team. So our current team has been set up since about the 1970s, recognizing the high hazard that there was. The Calgary was built on the Bow River. There was the weir that was there. We had 14 people drown in that over the history of it before it was changed over by the province. So there is recognizing that hazard, plus all the community lakes that have grown around Calgary, and the majority of those are human made. However, there is that drowning hazard that's there as well. And, this is part of why we want to do these type of safety presentations to talk about the hazards that people may not realize. And as you said, when you think of going to a beach somewhere, usually it's somewhere pretty warm. Water in Alberta is all cold. So that brings its own types of hazards as well, which is something we'll talk about more today.
All right. Well, I won't stand in your way. I'll let you get started. You want to go ahead and share?
Right. Okay, so starting with our presentation, welcome to the Calgary Fire Department. Where there's water, there's risk. Staying safe around Calgary's waterways. So as I already talked about, this is a little bit of a snapshot of where our city is located. So, knowing that we've referred to as Calgary for about the last 140 years, it was known as Mohkinstsis, Wichisbo-Yade, Gootsits, and Otusquini, the indigenous communities before that. But everyone continues to gather here because of our two waterways, that fast-moving Bow River, like I talked about, and the Elbow River. A little bit more of the Calgary Fire Department team. Like I mentioned in the intro there, we've been around since about the 1970s in its current format. Earlier on in the 1950s, some of our own crews recognized that we needed to provide some sort of water safety. So like I talked about the weir in the Bow River. So just off of, Memorial Drive in Deerfoot, where you see it's now known as Harvey Passage, there was a weir there to prevent the Bow River from freezing up in the wintertime, because there was an irrigation canal that went off of that. So it was very important that water continue to flow even in the wintertime. But that weir was basically unofficially known as a drowning machine. So the force of the water was so hard that if somebody was in the water, they would get pushed underwater and basically be spun around and not able to get to the surface. So it was very important why, as emergency responders, we filled the gap to make sure that we were providing that emergency rescue. And then now we're doing a lot more on the prevention side to make sure people are well informed and can avoid having any type of serious incidents here. As you can see in this picture here, we cover the aquatic surface rescue. So we do surface rescue, which is the red suits and the inflatable rafts, as well as we run our jet boats on the river. So you'll see those patrols happen on busier days, making sure that we're able to respond very, very quickly. You can see we have a picture of one of our firefighters rappelling off a bridge as well. So that's a big thing we do to help people, as bridge abutments or the bridge pillars is a high hazard for people getting pushed up against by the current and getting stuck there. So that's the way we would rescue them, as well as we do shallow water scuba diving. So that's another component of the fire department, rescue and recovery. So, if anybody is pushed under the ice for some reason or, stuck in the river, then we're able to go and look for them. So there's important parts with our team. We're very proud as well. Our team in 2004 was recognized with the Higgins and Langley Award as one of the top swift water rescue teams across the world. So it's something that is very significant. And again, coming from a little kind of prairie city, it's something we're proud of. In this picture here, we have 3 aquatic rescue stations. So if you look at this map, starting the northwest, Silver Springs Fire Station number 21, and the Eau Claire Fire Station number 6, and then down in the south, 30 station in Mackenzie, the Mackenzie Town Fire Station. So if you also can see in this picture, it basically follows the pattern of the Bow River. So they all have readily accessible to the Bow River to do those type of rescues. This isn't showing up very well on my slide here, but when we talk about water safety, we're focusing on drowning prevention. So when you look at drowning, it basically is anytime someone falls into a liquid, so typically a body of water, and their natural ability to breathe is now impacted by that. So that's kind of where you could have dry drownings and you can have wet drowning. So wet drowning would be you have water inside the lungs. Dry drowning would be you fell into the water, you got out, but then your natural ability to breathe is impacted by that, even though there's no water in your lungs, but you have effectively drowned as well. We have fatal drownings and non-fatal drownings. And just some local statistics to Alberta, looking at this, the drowning report over a 10-year period, unfortunately, we have about 30 people have a fatal drowning every season. And then about 124 people have non-fatal drownings. Of that, I believe it's in the 24 people would be admitted to hospital from that. So looking at this breakdown further on this chart, rivers continue to be our highest hazard. So on average of that 30 fatal drownings, it's about 10 people that would be in a river setting. And then about 7 into like calm water conditions or a lake. And then we're going to talk about one other category here, but you can look at this picture. If we really look at that basic breakdown, 2 categories of water: fast moving water, like our rivers. So that's also known as swift water. And then our calm water, which is more our lakes and ponds type of area. So this is a picture in the Kananaskis River, which is part of where the Bow River flows through. You can see our firefighters doing our training. Very big waves, very, very fast moving, highly hazardous. So it's very important people stay safe in that, which is, what I'm going to talk a little bit more about. And then there's a breakdown here, goes in the different classifications of water. So if anyone's familiar with swift water, if you have a class 1 is kind of smaller waves, there is a current that's moving. And then as you go to the higher numbers is larger currents. So think all the way to like Niagara Falls type of drop, right? So in Calgary, we tend to have mostly 1 to 2, class 1 and 2. And then as you get into the Harvey Passage, there is more class 3 areas. So on this chart, you can see, highly irregular waves. You need to get out and scout ahead before you actually go through a feature in a boat or try to swim through it, which is a much more advanced skill of swimming in the river. But I think that we'll have some questions about that later. And then just as a little bit of a chart here, you can see where the current goes. That basically, if you don't do anything, that current's going to carry you in the water. So it's very, very important people aren't putting their feet down because potentially get caught on rocks. Because again, under the water is all this rock surfaces. So if someone puts their foot down, they can get caught, and then the current will actually push them over and then pin them underwater, which is not a good situation for people. So being well aware of the conditions and the environment that you're going into. And then the next category, on average, about 7 people in the province will drown in a calm water scenario, which is more lakes or ponds. We kind of see this across different seasons. So, I say maybe a little bit more commonly is people doing winter activities. So they'll take their trucks out onto the ice, more outside the city, not in the city, to do ice fishing, and then, turn around, your truck is gone because it's at the bottom of the lake. So just being aware of those changing conditions, the winter time. Again, people skidooing across frozen lakes or ponds. Again, through that course of the day, things can change very rapidly. So again, that's where about 7 people. And this third category, I think, is a little bit more surprising to people, but it's, to me, a very preventable situation, is in bathtubs. So unfortunately, on average, 6 people have a fatal drowning in the bathtub in the province. So making sure when we have little ones, any infants, right, they can't sit up on their own. So there should always be an adult or caregiver within arm's reach, watching over, actively supervising, so that their little ones don't fall over in the water, because we can drown as little as, an inch of water, or the 2.5 centimeters for the metric scale. The other way as well is making sure, any adults, seniors, if you're, really, really tired or taking medications, or maybe even having a lot of refreshments and having a good time, you don't want to fall asleep in the bathtub. So we can avoid, and I just want to highlight this one a little bit, just because, we pretty much all have bathtubs in our homes, but this one is definitely could be prevented. Just making sure, again, little ones are supervised. We're not taking a bath when we're really drowsy for any reason, and then end up, slipping under the water. So So now this next part I'm going to go into is just how to plan a water trip. So this is going to be applicable to all our different water bodies of water I've talked about here. But again, just going through those different steps, and it's going to be really good information to go with. So the first step is know before you go. So planning to prevent a water emergency. So the first thing you need to know is, I already mentioned it, all water in Alberta is considered cold water. So looking at this chart, 20 degrees Celsius, and that's the water temperature, not the air temperature, but the water temperature. So anything below 20 is considered cold water. So looking at this, the legal limit for a hot tub is 40 degrees Celsius. So anyone that really likes being in a hot tub, that's going to be 38 to 40 degrees Celsius. So if you feel comfortable in that, just know every other single body of water is going to be colder than that. For those familiar with the northwest of Calgary, Vacova by the university, that is considered the warmest pool in the city, and they set their temperature at the lowest at 35 degrees Celsius. If you look now below that, 28 degrees Celsius is the average pool temperature. So when you go into, I think some of the like MNP or the other 50-meter pools in the city, like Seton YMCA, the university, for, high level swimmers are going to set this more, 27, 20, maybe even 26. So if that water feels cold in a swimming pool, know that every other body of water is much colder than that. 17 degrees Celsius is about the average of our community lakes in the city. So even in the peak of summer, you might get 20 degrees in the shallower parts of the water, but for the most part, that lake water is actually very, very, very cold. 10 to 15 degrees Celsius for our rivers. So again, that fast moving water, thinking back to the earlier graphic I had, that water is coming from the mountains. So it's coming from a higher altitude, being melted snow, rain, that's coming into the waterways and flowing down the river. So again, that is very, very cold water. And then, as we all know, at 0 degrees Celsius, water becomes ice. So in the wintertime, when we have a layer of ice just below that water, it's about 2 to 4 degrees Celsius in that water. And then obviously when it's 0, it's frozen as ice. So just be aware. That's all of that to say, it's very cold. And I think a lot of people don't think of that when they jump in the water. They're expecting it to be warm. It's summer, it's hot air, but that water is very cold. You're going to lose your body heat very, very quickly. So considering having other types of layers that you wear. So whether it's wearing a wetsuit, if you're planning to be in the water, I think sometimes when people go for a swim, they're expected to be warm and they end up cramping up or panicking because the water's so cold. So again, having the different layers of wetsuits, if you're paddling in the river, considering have something like a dry suit, it's going to keep you warmer for longer. So these are just other considerations. Further to our know before you go is checking the weather and water conditions. So in this little graphic here, just making sure there's not a thunderstorm. If there's any type of thunderstorms, you don't want to be on the water. Any lightning strikes, anything like that, you want to avoid that. So make sure you stay away from the water when that's happening. But otherwise, a lot of the nicer warm days is when we tend to want to get out on the water. So further to the know before you go, after we check the weather conditions to make sure it's good weather for us to be outside, is to check the water conditions. So these are posted through the city social media, as well as all the websites. Calgary.ca/WaterSafety is just about the current water conditions. So on the left side of your screen here is talking about the river conditions. So this is more based around flooding, that if anything's in the green, that is going to be where it's safer to be out on the water. Anything you can see, it goes in the higher river flow. We have a lot of debris in the water, or it starts going into potential flooding conditions. So as you can see on the orange into the red, that's where we don't advise any boating. And then we might go as far to having the water advisory to say nobody should be on the water. We should be in that red kind of category. For anybody that goes out to any of the community lakes, they use the flag system, which works on the same premise. So you can see if the green flag is up, that's going to be where it's appropriate and safer. When I say that, wherever there's water, there's risk, right? So nothing's 100% safe, but in terms of appropriate use, if you're doing things properly and safely, then it's appropriate to go down to the water. And that's where the lakes will use that different system for that. And then this moves us on to our next step with our trip. So after knowing, know before you go is now making your plan. So for anybody going on to the river at the common river access points, you will see these large signs from the city, which is kind of that overlap to the parks area. And then the fire department, we want to make sure people are looking at these. It gives you approximate float times to the common launch points and takeout points on the river. And that's an important thing because I think maybe some people don't realize how long they're out on the river. So now all this information layers together that when you check the weather conditions, it has to be, what the forecast is for the whole day. So if you go out at the start of your trip and you look on here, to get from Stanley Park to Sandy Beach takes 3 hours. Being aware what is the weather conditions going to be 3 hours from now. So just making sure that you prepare all those things. So that's where using that information of the water and weather conditions and starting to make our plan here. Further to making our plan is to pick the right watercraft. So when we plan to go on the water, we want to know where we're going in and out of the water, how long we plan to be on the water for, how many people are on the trip with us, because that's going to layer into this next part to make sure we have a watercraft that's appropriate for the number of people and can support the weight of all the people that we have with us. We don't want unexpected guests showing up or whatever it is. So making sure, again, the ratings of it. So I'm just going to go through a couple different types of watercrafts here. So this first one, hopefully everyone recognizes, these are beach toys. These are meant for swimming pools or calm water only. So if you live at a community lake or have access to a community lake, the designated swimming area that's usually roped off, that is where you would use these type of inflatable things. The other way to look at it, if you need to use just your lung capacity to inflate one of these, it's not going to withstand being on the river. It's not safe for that. So make sure you only use these in calm water because they are just that, a beach toy. That's important to know. The next category, we have canoes, right? So you can see these people in here. An important other part that the next messaging is wearing their PFDs. But they're in a canoe, there's 3 of them. There's 2 adults and 1 child. So making sure, again, it's appropriate for the number of people that are going to be there. If they added another adult, they would probably look at having 2 canoes. So just be aware, again, what the limitations of the watercraft are. Inner tubes. This is, you can see in this picture, these are very clearly in swimming pool setting, right? Some people have tried to use these on the river. When they get themselves seated in there, they have a hard time getting back out, right? You sit right into the middle and you kind of sink in. And if your bottom is kind of hitting the water, it can be very challenging to get out and steer. So that's where we really, recommend people only use these in a swimming pool setting, calm water setting, not on the fast moving Bow River type of place. Stand-up paddle boards have become very, very popular lately. So you can see in this picture here, we have one of our firefighters who's off duty using their stand-up paddle board. So they have all their safety equipment. It may not be obvious in this picture, but many stand-up paddle boards come with an ankle leash, right? It's an kind of a overlap between surfing and a watercraft. So this is more meant for paddle. This is paddling as opposed to a surfboard where you wouldn't have a paddle. You wear an ankle leash because if you fall off your board, the waves aren't going to carry your board away. You're able to get back on. If you're using this in a calm water setting, like a lake, you can wear your ankle leash. That's no problem. It's very, very dangerous to use that on our Bow River. With the way the current works, that if you get pushed and you fall off your board can get pushed one direction. You end up going the other way, like around a bridge pillar or around a rock. And that could actually force you underwater and then lead to a fatal drowning. So it's very important you don't wear those ankle leashes on the Bow River. That's a big, big hazard. One of the other pieces we have in here that maybe not as obvious, right? The firefighter's wearing his PFD, but other consideration is also to wear a helmet. As you look at that, if you're up standing on the board, and if you fell off the board and there's a lot of rocks in the river, gravel bars and all that sort of stuff, there's that potential, to land on your face or land on your head. So wearing a swift water helmet for that be another consideration as well. Further, now we talk about kayaks. Again, kayaks are usually designed to have, 1 person, 2 person, 3 person. So again, just make sure you have the proper one. There's other sit on top kayaks as well. There's sit in kayaks. So just be aware of all those different features of what you're comfortable with. And very commonly for a lot of people as beginners, you're going to use something like an inflatable raft. You go to a rental company. It's usually what they do. It saves a lot of space. But do make sure that these are inflated to the proper pressure. If you're renting it from a company, they will ensure all those different things. If you buy your own, make sure you check the labels, look at the rating for it, and consider having the electric pump because that will help you pump it up to the proper one. What we see is people will think, they'll just kind of give it a squeeze, think it's firm enough. But just the way, again, where that current goes. So if a raft is going down the river and gets pushed against, say, a bridge abutment or the pillar, that current can actually fold that entire raft if it hasn't been inflated to the proper pressure, which is a big hazard. People fall out, get stuck or trapped kind of by the current. And that's where we have to go and rescue them. So a lot of people can avoid having that happening by ensuring their inflatable rafts are the right size for the group they have and inflated to that proper pressure. So then now that we, made our plan around where we're getting in and out of the water, number of people, right watercraft, we know the weather, water conditions, you need to make sure you bring the right safety equipment. So this is the stuff you're going to carry within your watercraft with you. So very, very important. Hopefully many people have heard this. Always wear your life jacket whenever time you're boating. In the city of Calgary, there is a bylaw that you have to wear a life jacket or PFD while you are on our waterways. So that's something that the police and bylaw are actively looking for. The fire department, we're always going to help educate and give you the heads up so that you don't have to get a ticket over this sort of thing. But more importantly, it is a life safety piece. So it's something that we want people to be aware of. Again, when I said how cold that water is, the life jacket helps give you a little bit of warmth, helps give you that buoyancy, and reduces that hazard of getting pushed under the water by having the proper life jacket. So with that, we're going to go into a little bit more detail. And this is from the Life Saving Society. It's how to fit a life jacket. So step one is to look at the size, to make sure it's the proper rating for you. So inside the label is going to tell you to make sure, especially for children, it'll be the proper weight range, or it'll say adult on it, and make sure that you look for those, as well as it'll have a little checkbox to say it's been certified by Transport Canada. That's a very, very important one. I just want to caution this for everybody. If you do buy a life jacket, if you go into any of the stores in the city and you buy one, it will be, it will be properly rated. If you buy one online through anywhere, do make sure that it is properly certified, because sometimes you can find a really, really good deal and buy it, and it's something that's shipped from another country, but it doesn't actually meet our safety standards. So these are, again, not rated for our cold water conditions, our fast moving water, all those pieces. So it has to be certified by Transport Canada. So check those labels, again, especially if you buy anything online. Okay, so once we have the proper size life jacket, the next thing we're going to do is actually double check the fit. So with any life jacket, you want to zip up any zippers, click or buckle any of the buckles, and then pull to tighten. So you should be where the life jacket should be snug. So you should be able to still breathe while you're wearing it, but it should be relatively snug. This is now going into the pull test. So you basically would have another person help you, grabbing on the shoulders. They will try to lift the PFD, because if you imagine you fell in the water, the PFD is going to float up and you more likely to sink down. So by doing that pull test on the shoulders, it shouldn't go any higher than 3 fingers above your shoulders. If the life jacket or PFD slides any higher than that, then readjust it. Again, make sure you zip up any zippers, buckle any buckles, and then tighten. And then if that still doesn't work and it still slides around on you, or it's too tight, then look for a different size and then redo the test. Again, it shouldn't go any more than 3 fingers. We definitely don't want people having oversized ones where they slide out the bottom. So if you were in the water and the PFD or life jacket floats above your ears, then you can't see anything and it's not going to do the purpose, and you're more likely to slide out the bottom. So do make sure you do those steps, the proper size, and then zip, click, and pull, and then do that pull test to make sure you have the proper size life jacket or PFD for yourself. One other piece I want to add on top of that as well, there's some newer PFDs that are automatic inflation PFDs, and those would only be appropriate for calm water. So if you're doing something, say, like stand-up paddleboard, the SUP yoga has become very, very popular. You're on calm water and you wore one of those, a PFD might be too bulky for you. What the auto-inflating ones do is, as you fall into the water, it activates a CO2 canister, which immediately fills that PFD to give you the buoyancy it's rated for. On calm water, it generally works. I generally would advise people wear, a full foam PFD. But if you choose to wear one, only do that on calm water, because there's been issues where they don't deploy properly on the fast moving water of the Bow River, or how fast that current is. It's actually more force than that inflation can inflate, and then you get no buoyancy out of it. So if you're on the Bow River, on our rivers, make sure you have the foam PFDs. If you want to use the self-inflating ones, there's different costs associated with it, but be aware of the activity, the environment again, and just know that those are not appropriate, those self-inflating, for the fast-moving water on the Bow River. In this picture, as you can see as well, there's another piece. In addition to the PFDs, is making sure you have a sound signaling device, which generally is a whistle. So if you get into any trouble, it's much easier to call for help by blowing the whistle as opposed to yelling, especially if you're in the water. That may or not be as easy to yell when you're in the water as well. So just to recap some of the safety equipment I talked about, that is very important If you're on any watercraft, and this comes from Transport Canada, so if you're on any watercraft, any type of boat, whether it's a motorized boat or any of these other ones that I went through the list where you're paddling on, you can't use the motorized ones in the city. So this is just, people go outside the city to use those. But the paddling watercraft in the city is every person on that boat or watercraft has to have their own PFD. In the city of Calgary, you have to be wearing that PFD. Each person on their PFD should have a whistle as well. The generalized piece is a sound signaling device, but it's just the easiest one for every person to have their own whistle on their PFD, and then also have a 15-meter haul line. So in this picture is our boat safety kit. I brought one here with me as well. So you can see on the picture, there's a few contents in here, but these are sold anywhere you can buy PFDs and watercrafts. There's a couple different features on them. So they have a reflective surface in the lid, which is helpful. If you get into trouble, you can use the reflection of the sun. So if we do have to send out a helicopter to look for you, it's much easier to see that reflection than, you yelling and screaming and waving your arms type of thing. Some of the other pieces that will be in there as well as a flashlight. So if for whatever reason you get stuck on the water well past nighttime or past sunset, it's a lot easier to find somebody if there's a flashlight. I would recommend when you plan your trip, do not stay out that late, especially on the river. There's not adequate lighting for you. So make sure that when you do your plans that you know where you're going to get out before you get nightfall, especially on the river. I think there's some areas that do have some nighttime boating kind of more on a lake format, and that's something that's a bit different. The other part that comes with these kits is the bailing bucket. So if you get water into your watercraft, this is what's going to help you get that water back out and paddle yourself to shore. So it's very important as well that if you get into trouble, your boat's starting to leak, the bailing bucket's just to get the water out so you can get to shore. It doesn't mean you keep doing your trip, right? It means your boat is sinking. So you need to get out of the water. Inside the kits as well are there's the throw line I talked about. So every watercraft, very minimum, like I said, has to have your PFD, your sound signaling device, and the 15-meter haul line, 15-meter. So this has the buoy on it as well. And the kit also has the little whistle, which, like I said, everybody should have one on their PFD anyway. So these are important that all the watercrafts, you should have a boat safety kit. If you're on a motorized craft, you're going outside the city, you'd also want a fire extinguisher for that. But that's, a little bit more than what I'm covering here again, because focusing on what's in the city. But the boat safety kit is very, very important thing. If people are doing stand-up paddle boarding, you want to have all the same things with you. However, you don't need a bailing bucket because it's not going to hold any water. So if you just have the rope while wearing your PFD with the whistle, that would suffice for a stand-up paddle board. But again, those are the three important things that everybody has to have: PFD, sound signaling device, and the rope for safety. Depending on your watercraft as well, like all the examples I went through, having a paddle or oar. So you can see in the picture here, the kayaker would have a paddle that has the paddle on the two sides. You can also have the T-handle paddles. The oar is something that's attached to the boat. So you can see in the other one, there's the little plastic ring that's holding that oar to the boat. It's very important you have something to actually steer with. And that goes back to my example when I said, we don't advise people go on the inner tubes on the river, being that there's nowhere to store a paddle with you and you can't steer. And if you can't steer, you're going to get pushed right into rocks. You're going to get pushed into the bridge pillars. So you need to have something to steer with, which would be your paddle or oar. So making sure you have those. And then now this last step is just that recap to double check. Once you make your plan, you know the conditions, you bring all the right things with you, that you double check before you get on the water. So you don't have unexpected guests that are now joining you that need to have their own PFD or that, might exceed the capacity of your watercraft. So just make sure all those haven't changed or the weather hasn't changed. We all been in Calgary for a while, right? So we know that can change very, very quickly on us. So double check, and it's okay to reschedule your trip if it's not going to be safe anymore. So this is just kind of that checklist, double check those weather conditions, water conditions, watercraft, everyone has the right safety equipment, and go through the plan with everybody as well to make sure everyone's aware. If someone falls out of the boat, what are you going to do? You don't want anybody to, but you want to pre-plan it so people are aware of where the safety equipment is, where the boat safety kit is, what's in there, how are they going to rescue people? Are they going to go, to the right shoreline? If there's multiple watercrafts, how are you going to help each other and then call 911 and do all those different things? So make sure you go through that whole plan of what to do in an emergency as well. Okay. This other ones is just that reminder as well, is making sure adults are always stay within arm's reach and actively supervise any children. So there's PFDs for children that they should be wearing as well. Adults should be wearing, but anywhere that you are, make sure that you're always within arm's reach. Anybody who goes to any of the swimming pools, be it run by the city or any other organization, I think generally for like less than 13-year-olds, they make you do a swim test just to make sure that you have the swimming abilities to say what area of the swimming pool you can go to. But then 8 and younger, there should be an adult supervising and making sure, you know, that you don't have more kids than you can actually actively supervise. So I think for the most rule of thumb, 3 to 4 is a good number for one adult to supervise. Any more than that, then you should have another adult join you, and making sure that you're actively watching the kids as well. Just this can prevent a lot of emergencies and drownings from happening by doing this. I have this little graphic up here just because it's also helpful for people to know very basically river left from river right. So the way this jet boat is going, that's our fire crew. They are going downstream. So if you're facing downstream, then that's how you orientate to left and right. And this just becomes important that if you get into trouble and you move to one of the shorelines, it helps the fire department know where you are if you can tell us if you're on river left or river right. So that makes a big, big difference. And this just goes into a bit of that safety piece. If you fall out of a boat in the river with that fast moving current, you want to lie on your back and point your feet downstream and lie flat. So your feet are up off the bottom of the water, so you won't get caught on any rocks. You're wearing your PFD, so you have that flotation. And then by going feet first, then you can kind of steer with your arms to make sure you're not going to, you know, you're not going to hit any rocks or any hazards face first. By being feet first, you can use your feet to protect yourself and then move yourself to left or right. In this picture here, you can see this is right by the Peace Bridge. So river left is where Memorial Drive is, and then river right is where the downtown and Eau Claire area is. So just, you know, give people that basic idea. And that's going to help us know, again, like I said, the fire crew goes, we're sending the jet boat or we're sending a fire truck, we're not going to end up on the wrong side of the river looking at you on the other side. So it helps us out by giving, you know, the basics of where you are. There's another important safety message is never attaching watercrafts together, or commonly, unfortunately, too commonly, I should say, we see people that will have, you know, a large group want to go down the river together, but they don't have one large raft big enough for all of them. So they're going to have, you know, multiple ones, and the temptation is to tie them together. So much like when I talked about the ankle leash hazard on the stand-up paddle boards, is very similar that if you tie watercrafts together going down our river, there's that high risk that the current will push it around obstacles like the bridge pillars or rocks or any other type of hazard or trees. And then you can't separate, the force of the current is too high. You can't separate these watercrafts. Generally, one will get pushed under and the other will be stuck at the top, and that pushes people underwater. There's no safe way to do this on our Bow River. So just avoid connecting any of the watercrafts. Have them separately, go through the plans, use your paddling skills to kind of stay together. If you need to go off to the shore together, then do that sort of thing, but do not attach any of them because it's not safe at all. Big drowning hazard for people to do that. This picture here is just if you do want to, you know, this is a little bit more advanced for some of the people that are stand-up paddleboard athletes or enthusiasts, is the quick released waist belt. So instead of having the ankle leash, right, if you're doing certain things and you fall off your board and you want your board to float away, this is something you have to buy separately. It usually doesn't come with most paddle boards, and it's more of a specialty paddling shop would sell them. But you wear it around your waist. That way, if you do fall in the water and the board gets hooked on something, or you're going the other way, you can see that little yellow ball there. That's something that someone can pull as a quick release, and that's going to release them from their board. So again, that's where it's going to be intermediate or advanced user that would recognize when is it dangerous and need to pull the release. So if you don't know, aren't sure, just don't wear it. Don't connect yourself to the board. Don't wear the ankle leash. It's going to be a lot safer. You'd rather, you know, if you fell off your board, someone else will recover your board for you, but at least you're safe and not pulled under the water. So that's just what this picture represents. If you're really, really into it, go to a specialty shop, talk to the staff there. There's a lot of different associations that will do a lot of training. They have safety plans and groups together. They'll do these activities together. So that'd be a lot safer if you want to pursue that sort of thing. Basic survival skills here. This is from the Life Saving Society. Their Swim to Survive program is basically making sure if you do unexpectedly fall in the water, you want to get your head above the surface of the water, be able to tread water so you can orientate yourself and swim 50 meters. So the reason why I show this picture, this is from the dive boards at the Seton YMCA. So with the bulkhead move, 50 meters is from one end of the pool all the way to the other end. So that's just imagining, you know, if you were out on a lake and you were paddling and your raft deflated, are you able to swim back to shore? That's a thing where I think when people buy watercrafts, they get really, really excited and they want to go right across the middle of the lake. And if you paddle farther than your ability to swim back to shore, that's a dangerous situation. So you want to be sure that you stick to the shorelines, you know, until you're sure about what you're doing, sure about your watercraft, and just make safe choices that way. And this is where, you know, a lot of people, we would reduce that 30 people a year drowning if everybody had these skills, right? So just emphasizing that, learn to swim, you know, making sure people know their own abilities, as well as when you plan around your water trip, how long you're on the water, that, you know, your energy levels at the start of the day versus the end of the day can be very, very different. So make sure that, you know, anything, if you're going to go a farther distance or something more strenuous, do that earlier on when your energy levels are higher. And then as the day wears on, as the trip goes on, then do the shorter activities. So you're not, you know, if you get into trouble, you're still going to have the energy levels to save yourself or stay safe as well. So, all right. And then going to round out here, the last few pieces is water rescue. So what to do if you see someone else get into trouble. So the first one is we have there is talk, which is coaching somebody. So if you see someone else fall in the water, if you're able to shout instructions to them, you know, tell them to look at you and kick their legs, then that generally can help a lot of people. Then you know that they're responsive. They can follow your instructions. When they're looking at you and kicking, that's going to help them move towards you. Sometimes when people will try to yell, be like, oh, swim to me. But if not everyone knows how to swim, that doesn't mean anything, right? So that may not be as intuitive for people. So make sure you give them instructions. If they can self-rescue, that's ideal. The biggest thing we want to make sure is people stay safe and keep yourself safe so you do not become a victim in the water as well. So after, you know, shouting instructions to somebody, then call 911 as well. So if that person is trying to rescue themselves, you call 911. You want to give as much information as possible, like a description of the person. We're going to talk in the next slide here about, you know, other considerations. But that way, by calling 911, then the specialists are coming, we're going to come and help. But giving a description of the person is going to be very, very helpful, that if you lose sight of them for some reason, or they dip below the water line, then we're going to be able to find them much faster if you knew what they were wearing, you know, PFD, clothing colors, anything that really stands out. It helps us get there, find them much quicker. On this other piece here, for anyone that's familiar or did any lifeguarding at some point in their life, the other parts of like throwing something that floats to them is going to be it's going to help them. If you're able to, if you're close enough, you can lay down and reach out to them. So using like your paddle or something like that, if you're close enough, you just want to make sure you don't get pulled into the water. And then when we talked about having your boat safety kit, having the rope, well, that's something where you can throw a much farther distance and then now effectively reaches the person. And then you get nice and low, lie down, and then you can help pull them as they kick their legs and get back to a safer spot. The big emphasis we have is don't go, right? It can be very, very dangerous for anybody. So this is where, as a fire department, we're especially trained to rescue people in these situations. We wear our own personal protective equipment that keeps us safe and warm. I think some people, you know, even if you have lifeguarding experience, it can be very dangerous to rescue somebody in a river if that's something you're not trained to do. You may be trained to rescue people in a flat water or a swimming pool, and that's where, you know, it'd be appropriate for you to do that. But otherwise, we just don't want people putting themselves at risk. So make sure you follow these steps. Again, shouting instructions for the person to self-rescue, calling 911, giving a description of them, throw them something if you can, reach if you can safely, and then that's going to be the best situation there. And then that goes into, and I think this slide just kind of overlapped a few pieces. When you call 911, they're going to ask you a bunch of questions. They're going to ask you, you know, what town or city. So depending where you are, it's very important to start with that, because Calgary 911 takes the calls across Southern Alberta. It's very important. That's their first kind of layer of filtering. They're going to ask you what the emergency is, and they're going to ask you what the address is. Now, I don't know about anybody else, but I sure don't know the address of the Bow River or specific spots on it. So you're going to look for landmarks. That's going to be different pieces. Sometimes people will give us like the outfall numbers. So that's kind of where there's like the water drainage that goes into the river. That, you know, it's there, that does help. But if you can look for bigger landmarks. So when, you know, I showed you that earlier example of the Peace Bridge to say, you know, we have just passed under the Peace Bridge. Well, that's going to help narrow it down a lot more for us. Or, you know, what's in closer proximity. If you do know that, and that's part of, you know, planning in advance and making a plan of knowing where you are, that, you know, let's just say we put in at Baker Park in the Northwest. and we are now passing Edworthy Park. Well, then that helps narrow it down as well if you know those different landmarks. So just be aware of where you're going, and that goes back to the pre-planning. So in an emergency, you're not panicking trying to figure out where you are and what's going on, and that delay could be very dangerous for other people. And then, so I think I cover a lot of different pieces of information in there. Going to Calgary.ca/water-safety is going to have a lot of links to that. Looking at the city of Calgary social media pages, they're always going to put their water advisories up on there. Like my colleague Randy talked about, Calgary.ca/fire for a lot of our other information. You follow the City of Calgary City of Calgary Fire Department Facebook page. We post a lot of our safety messages on there. We also have a YouTube clip. I did it last season. It's about 2 minutes that recaps a lot of the safety information. So helps us out if anybody wants to view that. It's a lot shorter summary than what I just covered here. But I'm glad I was able to come in and talk about water safety today.
That is fantastic. We do have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
Right. So you covered a bunch of things. So with kids at a pool, you said 2 to 3, 3 to 4 kids max?
3 to 4 max. And then this now goes back to like the swimming ability of all the kids. That would be an important thing. That 4 is kind of on the higher end, and that would be where, whether the kids are a bit older or have, more swimming lessons, swimming skills, that sort of thing. When they tend to, if you have younger kids or you need to actively be holding on to like 2 or 3, then it's like, well, 2 or less. So if you just one adult to one kid. And I think that's a piece where people, I would say over rely, because you do put a lot of faith in the lifeguards. They're highly trained, they're specialists, but when they have to watch over 50 people, 100 people in a pool, they're constantly scanning and surveying and watching for any hazards. So you help them out as an adult supervising the children that you're with, and if you don't exceed that ability, your ability to supervise, that's going to be a lot safer for everybody, right? So that's kind of where, if you're not sure, go to the lower numbers, maybe 2, maybe 1 type of thing. If you have a really little one, like less than 5 years old, that it should be like 1-to-1 in that situation. And then if you have more like, 4, 8-year-olds, well, that might be something you're more comfortable with supervising them, again, depending on their swimming abilities.
All right. And what about like if you want to take the grandkids down to, look at bugs along or ducks or just along the water's edge, or you're having a picnic somewhere along the water's edge, suggestions for safety?
Yes. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting things that happen around the waterways. Lots of wildlife that's interesting to look at. So just being very cognizant around where you are. So if you're at the Elbow River that moves a little bit slower, the hazard is different versus the Bow River. I'll just use the example of, say, like Baker Park and Boness Park. There's a lot of the eddies, which is a slower moving current water on the sides. So if you're sure about your safety and how the kids know where it's safe to go or not to get too far away from you, again, that active supervision within arm's reach, you're not at high risk of falling into the water, then they can generally be safe in those areas as long as you're actively supervising them. If you get closer to where there's fast moving water in the current, then you should wear a life jacket, even if you're not planning on being in the water. You unexpectedly fall in the water, it's going to be very, very dangerous. So wear a life jacket if you're closer to that fast moving current. It's something that many people, I think overlook because you're not planning to be in the water, but then that makes a huge difference for you. And this also extends to people's pets. There are a lot of, if someone has a dog that's a strong swimmer, they may or may not choose to put a life jacket on them. They do sell them for dogs as well. So just being very aware that again, like I said, that water is cold. The dog may or may not have that comfort and swimming ability. So you don't want something bad to happen. So consider putting the life jacket on the dogs as well, and keeping the kids safe away from the fast moving water. Wear life jackets when you're around it. If you ever watch the fire department train around the river, you will see all of us wear a PFD no matter what job we're doing. So we will always do that to make sure if we're within 6 feet of the water or 2 meters, then we will be wearing our life jackets as well. So
I will admit, I have been one of those people that has been in an inner tube on the Bow River. Firsthand experience, I can say it's a bad idea because your backside is not protected from the rocks. They can leave a really big bruise.
Yes.
We found that it took a lot longer to get down the river than we actually anticipated. and we ran out of water partway through.
Ah.
So what would you suggest for, supplies
Oh,
for
thank you.
keeping
Yeah.
yourself safe?
Yeah, for sure. So in addition to like the things I cover, like the PFDs, sound signaling device, and the throw rope and the paddles, um, is having some sort of, wearing some type of hat for the sun and sunglasses. If you're able to get polarized sunglasses, that helps reduce some of the glare because of the way that the sunlight reflects off the water.
Mhm.
That's where a lot of people as well, make sure you wear lots of sunscreen. You get the burns on the cheeks because it reflects off the water as well. So even if you're wearing the hat, wearing the sunscreen, as you're wearing your PFD. And that's, thank you for bringing that up and as well for the water supply that, goes into part of that knowing before you go in pre-planning. So like I said, at the common river put-in points, there's a signage. I think the city through the parks websites will have a lot of that information for how long it will take to go from one area to the next. As a general rule, or safety process for people is, frequently sipping the water rather than waiting till you feel thirsty and or potentially dehydrated and then suddenly drinking all that water very, very quickly. You can kind of manage your water supply a little bit more. But I think it varies on individuals as well, but you're probably going to be taking, at least, liter and a half per person, or possibly a little bit more, depending how you're sharing that water. But that goes into the planning of how long to go from one spot to another.
How do I put this? Recreational beverages and other substances
Mhm.
on the water. Yes, no,
It's a no. So
it's a
it's a
no.
no. It can be very, very dangerous for people on the water. It impacts your judgment and your coordination. And that can put people in the bad situations or increase the risk, the chances or risk that somebody will take. So the police and bylaw, in addition to watching for life jackets, are also monitoring to that. So this is more, the enforcement message on their behalf from the fire department. While we're not the ones to be issuing people tickets, we're making sure everyone's staying safe. If anybody is enjoying alcoholic beverages or anything else that they shouldn't be doing that can impact their judgment on the water, then CPS will be contacted, bylaw will be contacted, and they'll be supporting us uh, um, um, to make sure that people are safe. Like I said, the other part as well that, people's ability to swim is impacted by that or feel the cold of the water. It's very devastating as well when somebody, if you know anyone that does drown, it's such a terrible thing to go through as a social group, support group of somebody, and especially if you know it could have been prevented.
Mhm.
So that there's pretty much, it's a zero tolerance for alcohol on the rivers, and then like I said, that will be enforced by those agencies.
Yeah. So what about prescribed medications? So if, senior audience,
Mhm.
blood pressure medication, angina, taking that kind of thing with them. If you know you're going to be out, I would plan for at least 4 hours and it's hot. Suggestions around medications that they should take with them.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's making sure that people are follow your prescription and dosages as you normally would.
Mhm.
And then also be aware of any potential side effects for any of those medications. And I would say, if you're new to getting out on the water, you're not as sure, then go for a shorter trip, right? With this demographic,
Go with a professional
yeah,
first.
go with a
Do what
professional. Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of different options that way. Whether it's the rental companies that will they'll tell you exactly where to get in and out and how long it's going to be and give you directions, all those sorts of things. But make sure you bring that information with you, and keep yourself safe that way. Follow those, like I said, your normal prescriptions on it. But then I think as well, if for whatever reason, you get into any type of trouble, having that list of current medications on you helps first responders give you better care and any of those types of things. And then also make sure that, the activity is appropriate for you. So if you're taking certain medications and you can't do really, really high strenuous activities, then I would recommend you don't do stand-up paddleboarding on the river, right? That you would do something more like rafting, that's something, within your own abilities. So make sure you do consult your physicians for what's appropriate for you as well. I think there's a lot of things you can do on a lake environment that's a lot of fun, that you don't have to be on the river for. And if you're going to be on the river, then going with other people that can support you, help you, as you said,
buddy
going on a
system.
piece. Yeah, you never want to go alone. That's an overarching piece for any water safety thing, is never go alone. When I talked about the plan as well, as making sure that you give that plan to someone else who's not on the trip with you. So, let's just say we plan to go out on the water. I let my sister know who's not joining us today. That way she doesn't hear from me at the end of the day or the next day that she's like, hey, what happened? Right. That, there's someone else checking up on you when you're out on the water. So make sure you have that plan and share that with somebody else.
All right. And reporting emergencies that you see on, the river or any of our lakes. How do people help you with that?
Yeah. So calling 911 early is a big piece. And I think what we see, when there's a large crowd gathering, many people will assume someone else is calling 911. So never assume someone else is called. So if you see an emergency, call 911. The 911 call taker will let you know if they're like, you're the 50th person calling. They're going to tell you it's okay, hang up. If you're the person who's giving them the most reliable information, they will keep you on the line and tell other people to hang up. But we'd rather have 50 people call than nobody call, right? Definitely in the emergency, please call 911. I think maybe this is a different generation will start to video it before calling 911. So do make sure you let us know, and then we'll come and do our thing. As I talked about in the earlier slide there, making sure you look for landmarks. If you know the address, fantastic. Or if you're at a community lake and you know the name of that lake, that's going to help us get there much quicker and send the proper resources. So again, giving us as much information as possible, the as precise location as you can, looking for the landmarks, description of the person. That way, again, like I said, if they slip under the surface of the water, we're going to be able to look for them much easier if we knew what they were wearing and had a general description of them. So yeah, the sooner you can get the fire
Quickly
department
video
there.
them so you know what they look like and then call 911. Just
If
kidding.
you had a video of them, the last you saw them as you call 911, that would also work.
All
Um,
right. All right. So quick travel trips. So for people who are and we kind of talked about this. So like heat related illnesses, when you start to feel a little bit gross,
mhm.
at what point should you start to worry?
Oh yeah, no, thank you. And there's a part where, as you plan out your whole trip, it may go ideally, but if you start to feel different symptoms as you're going that, you run out of water, you might consider calling your trip a little bit shorter, or, you get really, really thirsty mouth, your skin is very, very hot. So it starts, turning into basically that sunburn or really, really bright red and it's hot. If you actually have trouble concentrating or remember like looking at what you're doing, then that would be considerations of that's the onset of some of that heat stress. And as the longer that goes, then it becomes, that heat stroke ultimately. So just being aware of any of those changing conditions. So if you need to get off the water because you're not feeling well or whatever it is, then do that. And then that's where having your full plan, having a backup plan, letting the other person who's not there, they can come and pick you up, get you to your other vehicle where you had pre-parked it or whatever it is. But just constantly being aware of those conditions. And that goes back to not traveling alone, that you're with other people. So you might recognize that sign or symptom in another person. Because if you're experiencing it yourself, you may think that everything is still going fine. Right. But if you're kind of like, oh, is this trip over yet? Like, I'm not feeling great. Then consider stopping where you are, get off the water, and then get into some shade, cool down, and figure out what you're going to do next. The other part I didn't highlight as much is like if having a dry bag for your phone. I know that a lot of people will be taking pictures and videos when they're out on the water, probably, right? Some people have waterproof phones. So I can tell you, the fire department, we recover a lot of people's phones in the water, and it's not very easy for you to pick it up yourself. So do make sure if you are taking pictures or video, keep your hands within the watercraft. So if you do drop it, it's not going to drop into the water. But consider having that waterproof bag. A lot of times it's almost like, a double sealed Ziploc kind of type bag or something like that, having two of those to keep the water out. That way, if you do get into trouble in an emergency, your phone is going to work and not shut down on you because it's wet. So make sure you have that emergency call device if you get into trouble or see someone else that gets into trouble.
Okay, and a last question for those who are interested in looking at, you talked about paddle boards, but are maybe just kind of dabbling into the whitewater rodeo side of things. And I don't know if anybody's seen that on the bow there. There's a couple of different spots. Suggestions on safety for those maybe that are just trying it out.
Yeah. Are you talking about like more like the river surfing type of things
Yeah.
or?
Yeah, so you where you were the weir And I know that riding those eddies or those waves. So
Yeah. So where the weir in Calgary was expanded to now called Harvey Passage. So there's two kind of sides to it. There's Harvey the left side, which is in the main river channel, which has 4 large drops in it, and that's a very advanced area. So anybody who is actively, in the paddling community and part of those associations and training for those sorts of things, that would be appropriate for them to use. Whereas the river right side of Harvey Passage is also the Sam Livingston Channel, is one of the other names. It is more a gradual drop, and you'll see a lot of recreational users there. It's very important when anyone uses that area to make sure you are wearing a life jacket. We see people swimming it without. That can be very, very dangerous. And again, the water is very cold. It's the same river channel that I talked about already. And it's all rock and concrete under there. So we see a lot of people bouncing off the bottom and getting scraped and bleeding. So making sure that, you
for
swimming,
safety.
again, swimming is a more advanced skill. So I would recommend, if you want to enjoy it, being in a raft, a small 2-person raft or something like that would be a better way to experience it. And then making sure as well, consider water shoes. Again, it's very rocky surfaces and they can be very uneven. So make sure you have good footing when you're in those areas, and even consider having like a rash guard, the surf shirts, long sleeve shirts that are meant to get wet in the water. Um, Anywhere in that area. If you really want to get into like river surfing, I would say the good starting point is to watch the groups that are doing it, because they often go as a group. And I think we actually have a lot of firefighters that have kind of taken that up. So it seems like, there are many people in the paddling and the river, the swift water community that are very interested in showing other people the proper safe way to do it. So if you're not sure, just watch them, get to know them, talk to them, and they'll go through all the different pieces and opportunities, and then teach you the safest way to do it. And then, joining those type of groups would be a safer way to approach it rather than going and trying it on your own.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us. Lots of good information. We appreciate
Fantastic.
it.
Thank you, everybody, and hope to see you in a non-emergency situation. So.